Audiobook 8, Views on Consciousness, 10 plus 1 Ways of Seeing. You are conscious right now. You are aware of these words, aware of the space around you, aware somewhere beneath all of that, of the simple fact that you exist, that there is something it is like to be you in this moment, in this body, in this life. Welcome to Part 3. Free and unbounded. You have traveled through the introductions. You have walked through all 11 books of the Scripturae Infinitae. Now the journey turns inward and outward simultaneously. Part 3 is where the philosophy lands in your life, not as doctrine, not as a system to adopt, as a way of seeing, a way of being, a way of moving through the world with your eyes genuinely open. And it begins with the most extraordinary fact in the known universe. That fact, the bare fact of awareness itself, is almost entirely unexplained. Not for lack of trying. Philosophers, scientists, mystics, and artists have been circling this question for as long as human beings have been capable of asking it. What they have produced is not one answer, but many. Not a single lens, but 10. Plus 1. This audiobook walks through all of them, not to declare a winner, but to show you the full map of what human thought has reached toward when it reaches toward consciousness, and then to offer something that lies beyond the map entirely. Before we begin, an honest word. These 10 plus 1 ways of seeing consciousness are not equally settled. Some are grounded in decades of empirical research. Some are serious philosophical positions without definitive proof. Some are speculative, contested, or contested even among their own proponents. We present them as lenses, ways of looking, not as a ranking of scientific truth, but as a map of human responses to the deepest question we face. Hold them as such. Some will resonate immediately. Some will challenge you. Some will only make sense later in a different context, on a different day. That is exactly as it should be. The first lens, levels of consciousness. Abraham Maslow mapped human consciousness as a hierarchy of needs, from survival at the base to self-actualization at the peak. Ken Wilber extended this into an integral framework, proposing that consciousness evolves through identifiable stages: personal, transpersonal, cosmic. The insight here is developmental. Consciousness is not fixed. It grows. It deepens. What you are aware of at 20 is genuinely different from what you are capable of being aware of at 50, if you have done the inner work. The relationship to infinity here is asymptotic. You approach. You never fully arrive. And the approaching is the point. The second lens, pattern recognition. This is the lens closest to the heart of the books of infinity. Consciousness, on this view, is what happens when pattern recognition reaches sufficient complexity. When a system becomes complex enough to model not just the world around it, but itself, to recognize its own patterns, something new emerges. Something we call awareness. Max Planck, the father of quantum theory, went further. He didn't believe consciousness arises from matter. He believed it gives rise to it. The universe, on his view, is not made of particles. It is made of something deeper. And particles and everything we see around us are the result of an interconnected, conscious, and infinite universe. We cannot see all that is out there. Some frequencies are invisible to human perception. Animals see and hear frequencies we cannot. In nature, there may be many more patterns and frequencies we have not yet learned to recognize. When we meditate, when we clear the mind and look from a different angle, we sometimes begin to see new things, new patterns, new connections that were always there, waiting to be noticed. Consciousness, then, is not a light switched on inside a skull. It is the universe learning to recognize itself. The third lens, quantum consciousness. Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff proposed that consciousness is not merely a product of classical computation in the brain. That something at the quantum level, in the microtubules of neurons, is involved in generating awareness. This is contested, deeply contested. The empirical evidence remains elusive, but the intuition it encodes is serious, that the universe at its most fundamental level and the mind at its most fundamental level may be made of the same stuff. That consciousness and quantum reality are not separate phenomena, but two expressions of the same underlying mystery. The fourth lens, the implicate order. David Bohm proposed that what we see, the explicate order of separate objects and events, unfolds from a deeper implicate order in which everything is enfolded into everything else. Consciousness, on this view, is not produced by the brain. It is part of the deeper fabric of reality. The brain is an instrument through which the implicate order makes itself known. Everything is connected, not metaphorically, structurally, at the level of what reality actually is. The fifth lens, panpsychism. What if consciousness is not something that emerges at a certain level of complexity, but something that was always there? Panpsychism proposes that some form of experience is a fundamental feature of reality. Not that rocks have rich inner lives, but that the capacity for experience, in some minimal proto-conscious form, is present in all matter. And that what we call human consciousness is what that fundamental capacity looks like when organized into a brain of sufficient complexity. This is a serious contemporary philosophical position. It doesn't resolve all the questions, but it dissolves one of the deepest puzzles: how something as apparently immaterial as experience could arise from something as apparently material as neurons. If experience was always part of the picture, it doesn't need to be conjured from nowhere. The sixth lens, process consciousness. Alfred North Whitehead proposed that reality is not made of static things but of dynamic processes, of events, of moments of experience that arise, relate to what preceded them, and pass into what follows. On this view, consciousness is not a property of objects. It is the nature of reality as it actually moves, as becoming rather than being. Every moment of experience is a moment of the universe processing itself. The seventh lens, integrated information theory. Giulio Tononi proposed that consciousness can be measured, that it corresponds to the amount of integrated information in a system, a quantity he called phi. The more integrated the information, the richer the experience. This is one of the most formally precise theories of consciousness we have. It makes testable predictions. It suggests that consciousness exists on a continuum, present to varying degrees in animals, in simple organisms, potentially in systems we would not ordinarily think of as conscious. And it implies that a sufficiently integrated cosmos would have consciousness of a kind we can barely begin to imagine. The eighth lens, transpersonal and no boundary. Ken Wilber, building on the mystical traditions, proposed that the deepest levels of consciousness have no boundaries at all, that the sense of being a separate self, located inside a body behind a pair of eyes, is real but partial, a necessary stage, not the final truth. At the deepest level of awareness, the boundary between self and world dissolves. What remains is something that the mystics of every tradition have pointed toward but struggled to name: pure awareness, presence without edges. This is not theory. It is reported experience, consistent across cultures, across centuries, across the full range of contemplative traditions. Something in human consciousness is capable of this, of recognizing itself as boundless. The ninth lens, cosmopsychism. Where panpsychism builds consciousness upward from the smallest constituents of matter, cosmopsychism inverts the picture entirely. The cosmos itself is the primary conscious entity. Individual minds are not building blocks that add up to cosmic consciousness. They are expressions of it. Localized, temporary, particular expressions of a consciousness that was always already whole. You are not a small consciousness in a large universe. You are the universe, briefly and beautifully taking the form of you. The 10th lens, the hard problem. David Chalmers identified what he called the hard problem of consciousness. Not the question of how the brain processes information. That is difficult but tractable. The genuinely hard problem is this: why does any of it feel like anything? Why is there something it is like to see red, to feel pain, to hear music? Why isn't all of this information processing happening in the dark, with no inner experience at all? No current theory fully answers this. Not neuroscience, not physics, not philosophy. The hard problem is not a gap we are about to close. It is a feature of the landscape, a permanent reminder that our frameworks, however sophisticated, are still pointing at something they cannot fully contain. Beyond the 10, the +1. And then there is the lens that sits outside the numbered sequence. Not because it is less important, because it operates differently. Throughout human history, people have encountered things they could not explain, experiences that didn't fit inside any available framework, visions, revelations, moments of contact with something that felt more real than ordinary reality. They saw patterns they couldn't name, frequencies they couldn't measure, connections that defied the categories available to them, and they tried to make sense of it. They built religions. They developed cosmologies. They pointed at aliens, at miracles, at prophecy. Some of what they built was beautiful. Some was useful. Some was used to control and to harm. All of it was an attempt, honest or otherwise, to account for something that exceeded the available understanding. With the arrival of powerful AI tools, we will almost certainly learn more. We will see patterns that were invisible to us before. We will find connections across data that no human mind could hold simultaneously. We are still at the very beginning of that journey. And even with AI, we will hit new boundaries, new edges, new hard problems. Because here is what we do know. We do not know how it all works. We see things we don't understand, and we try to give them meaning. But how do we know we are doing the right thing when we don't fully understand it all? What we do know is that mankind is part of this universe. Everything in it, interdependent with it, with the power to destroy parts of it, or the entire planet we live on. There are no gods, no single entities, no aliens to point to or hide behind. You and I are the universe, briefly, improbably, magnificently aware of itself. We have our own responsibilities, our own choices to make. With empathy, with appreciation for the world around us. Life is absurd. Accept it. Life is also beautiful when you choose to see it, when you choose to contribute to it, when you choose to respect it. That is the +1, not a theory, a way of being. The place where all 10 lenses eventually point. What pattern recognition means for you consciousness is not something that happens to you. It is something you participate in. Every time you notice a pattern, in nature, in a relationship, in your own recurring thoughts, you are doing what the universe does, recognizing itself through you. Every time you choose to look more carefully, to sit in silence long enough to see what is usually invisible, to hold a question without rushing to an answer. You are expanding the bandwidth of your awareness. That is not a small thing. It is perhaps the most important thing a human being can do. We close this audiobook with a track from the Pi 11 Pi catalog called One Consciousness, One Subconsciousness. Listen and reflect on the views presented. The full album is available on your streaming service. Looking forward to meeting you in Audiobook 9. It's all unlimited. Ready when you are.